Well, I thought I was a failure at creating something practical and realizable and not too futuristic, not some kind of UFO power supply, but something that we can use for our mundane terrestrial uses. And then I became surprised, or surprised myself today by surpassing myself all over again. Um, I bumble and stumble all along. What can I say? So I kept the Heaviside correction or solution for the Ferranti effect, namely the inclusion of a transformer, but I moved it away from the transfer coil that's linked to these coils. It's linked to this coil, these pair of coils by 10% coupling coefficient. I moved it down to here, in between the diode bridge and the capacitor. Now, an interesting thing happened. Oscillations occurred naturally between the capacitor and the transformer. And they're still there. What happens, though, is that without the transformer, there won't be any oscillations. And so when this capacitor gets fed by the 4-diode bridge, it just amasses voltage and then hangs there. It plateaus. It drops off a little, but mostly it just plateaus. And that serves as the backbone for the surge to develop. The instigation of the surge is this transfer coil, the very tiny, 10% coupling coefficient between this coil and these coils, and even less so for these. But you also need this capacitor fed by the 4-diode bridge to accumulate that energy. As I recall, it's been so long since the initial stages of developing this concept. And then the spark gap replaces mechanical relays to cut off the surge periodically to prevent it from escalating to infinite gain, so as to create a kind of oscillating kind of effect. So you get staccato wedges appearing here. But now that I put an inductive load here, because it didn't work over here, the inductive load just died. So I just put resistive loads here, and they work just fine. And they're going to receive pulsed AC pulsed AC power, and so a resistive load works fine. This one is a legacy held over from when I used to think of this as a rotor coil, the squirrel cage rotor on the interior of a AC induction single-phase motor. And so I had 1.67 ohms to balance the volts versus the amps for an EV. But now this is all solid state. This is simply a power supply. Can supply power for an EV. I'm getting ahead of myself. But if you want to boil water or run a steam engine, you can have a load number 2 here is merely 1,000 ohms. But you could have something much larger, because I want to show you what kind of power comes out of that. What you get is 600 megawatts out of a 1,000 ohm resistor. 600 megawatts. The voltage is 2 mega volts, and of course the current is going to be 1,000 times less at 2,000 amps. So 2,000 amps times 2 million volts, and you end up with... Oh, and then you take the RMS, of course, because these are not RMS down here, right? Right, these are just raw values. And then, so you take the RMS of the 2 million volts and the RMS of the 2,000 amps, multiply them together, and you get just shy of 600 megawatts. That's a lot of power to boil water if you want to run a steam engine. A lot of heating. A lot of lighting, a lot of heating, all of your electrical needs in an EV. So I'm still, focusing, supplying power for an EV to replace the battery pack. And so we're still using a 12-volt battery to supply 12 volts to a sine wave generator at rated to output 20,000 cycles per second of a voltage sine wave, and at 3 volts output to feed into this circuit and excite it. But the amperage, now that I moved this transformer away from over here and down to here, the amperage of the input has gone back to noise. So the input current is pure noise, while the input voltage into the circuit coming out of the sine wave generator is a nice clean voltage-oriented sine wave. But the input is still in the nano range. Where's the... I'm jumping around here, I know. Where's my... Oh, it's up here. Here it is. The wattage is... I don't know what it is. I took this to 1 second. I should have really taken them all to 4 or 10 seconds. So it's still climbing, but at 1 second, it's just under 83 nanowatts. So something less than 100 nanowatts. And that's a pretty good figure for your input cost. Now let's see, we covered this, so let's go to the inductive load. I had to split it up into 3 different, so this, the inductive load, the wattage is 50,000 watts, and that's pretty good for an EV, right? 50,000 watts. So let's take a look at the RMS current is 123 or 122 and a half amps and rising. The amps are rising. So that's pretty good. Amps for an EV. That's excellent, in fact. Now the voltage is dropping. That's what's kind of weird. It had a high point here of just under 419 volts, 419 at 1.364 seconds. And then when we get to 4 seconds, it's dropped to 406 and a half. So a little more than 406 volts, and slowly dropping. So I don't know what's going on with that. The wattage, though, is also dropping. So that's what's contributing to the wattage dropping off. But the amps are still rising. So it makes sense that the voltage should drop as a cost to the rise in amperage. The amperage is still rising. So I didn't do a long enough run of this simulator to actually know what it stabilizes at. So it makes sense that it's still trying to sort itself out. It's taking a long time to settle, 4 seconds. So that's when you increase the frequency so that you get quicker results and things stabilize more quickly. Now, this capacitor, I had to lower it to a picofarad because I got an error message when I took the simulation to 4 seconds. Less than 4 seconds, like 1 second, I didn't get the error message. So this is going to have to be a low value if you've got a load here. If all you're doing is supplying resistive loads up here, you can take this to as high as the same as this, I believe, 1e to the negative 3. 1e to the negative 2, and you start getting, I think matrix is singular, so the spark gap is not firing, and this thing blows up to infinite gain. Now the transformer is interesting. I tried different values, and your power gain is going to come when your left coil is high. So I made it arbitrarily 10 henries. I didn't really try the whole different range. I just tried the balance, was what I was looking to see what happens if I change the balance. So I suspect what happens is your secondary over here on the right-hand side has to be equal to or less than the primary side inductance. Otherwise, you're wasting power. You've got it all bunched up over here, and you're not transferring it. Because all we need is voltage. We don't have to worry about current. We don't want a step-down transformer. We just want voltage to pass over. So maybe a higher value on the right-hand side. I don't know. I didn't try that. But it should at least be equal to, let's put it that way. The right-hand side should be at least equal to the left-hand side, and both should be quite high. So you get lots of power. Because it's all about accumulation, and the lower the left-hand side is, for sure, the less power you're going to accumulate. And a load, an inductive load, excuse me, is not an easy load to supply power for. You need lots of power for an inductive load. A resistive load, they're not very demanding. That's why I've got so much power up here. but I learned very quickly when I moved the inductive load down to here that I need lots of power, and so I had to raise both sides to 10 henries, not just the left side. And then let's see, so the capacitor here is meant to stabilize all of that, and it also changes the frequency. Oh, so what happens without the inductive load, what you'll find is that with the capacitor in place here and the transformer in here, you get an oscillation effect, and as you lower the capacitance of this capacitor, the oscillations even out more quickly. They even out anyway, because it's as if the transformer is not there. The purpose of the capacitor is to store charge from these 4 diodes. The voltage rises to a plateau and holds there. But the inclusion of this transformer changes that and puts in oscillations so that it still rises to a plateau, but it oscillates. If the farads here is high enough, you can see it. They're there anyway. But if you lower the farads, you won't see it. It'll look like the way it was before. It rises to a plateau and holds there. So I chose to lower this because that seemed to be the direction that it was heading in anyway, so might as well speed it up and get there quicker. And so the oscillations, the frequency of the oscillations went up, and they died down more quickly to be a flat line, or the appearance of a flat line DC voltage that this capacitor is holding at. And what I see here happening is that this is basically an inductive load area, and this is a pulsed AC load area. And this is superb for inductive loads, and this is perfectly happy with resistive loads. So you can supply whatever kind of load you want practically, AC or DC, in a sense, provided you pair things off. Your inductive load is paired with DC, and your AC, your resistive is paired with your AC. Now, it's not to say you couldn't put another 4 diode bridge over here if you wanted to, but see, now that's getting into details that I don't need to get into, namely a sine wave inverter to feed your AC motor coil, whatever you've got over here. Or this could be your AC motor coil. No, it would be DC. I don't know. See, now I don't know if it would be valuable to make this your motor. I don't know if that would work well or not. I'm not sure. I don't know. Anywho, I call this now my mixed power supply, and I think it's pretty awesome because it's solid state, no moving parts, and you get a lot of output for very little input. Now, I had trouble compiling all the video segments that I've been making as I keep developing this. It came to over, not including this current video that I'm taping presently, it came to 10 gigabytes size file, my MP4 file. And there's no way I'm going to upload that, post that. So I went back to the segments, and there's something like 24 of them around. And altogether, the sum total is over 6 hours, I believe. So I'm just going to post them individually and number them, give them all the same title. Heaviside solution to the Ferranti effect, something like that is the title. But this circuit is a different circuit name than the previous one was my UFO circuit. That one I think was the Heaviside correction circuit, but this one I called my mixed power supply. Because it is different. So I really only have 2 circuits that I came up with. The UFO power supply and the mixed power supply. That's all I've been able to come up with. So I really don't have a motor per se. I can't say I do. It doesn't look like it in either of the 2 versions. They're both solid state, actually, now that I think of it. In the sense that the electrical side, what I'm simulating is solid state. Obviously, the UFO had an additional qualification to it, in which mechanical vibration was introduced, but would be expected to be introduced to make it work. Um, but the components themselves, the electrical circuit itself, is solid state. It doesn't involve trying to move. The circuit itself does not try to move anything, even though we may move the circuit, which is interesting now that I think about it. A UFO, if you have to vibrate a certain components of the circuit, that starts to sound like a homopolar generator. Certain similarities, which makes it very provocative. It's an extension of Michael Faraday. It takes it one step further, something he didn't look into, apparently. I'm not totally familiar with Michael Faraday's work, but at least it's not quite the same as a homopolar generator, but it's in the same ballpark. It's in the same category. And interestingly enough, gives similarly interesting results. What else? Let's see. I think that's everything that I need to cover. There are no exotic components. All the capacitors are 10 millifarads of equal, 10 milliohms of equivalent series resistance. So they are modeled after ceramic capacitors. There's nothing exotic and nothing extremely large or extremely small. So there are no nanohenry inductors. The smallest is 2 microhenries on this transfer coil, and similarly on these 2 current coils. And 10 henries on the transformer is not too bad, So I'd say, and the capacitors, 1 picofarad, 1 millifarad, it's not bad. It could be worse. I've done worse. And a 12-volt power supply feeding this thing, nanowatts, or a tenth of a microwatt, if you prefer. No more than about a tenth of a microwatt. No more than a tenth of a microamp. No, what? Oh, that's right. No more than a tenth of a microwatt from your 12-volt battery will be drained to supply this thing. So I'd say that's pretty good, considering the fact you could easily run an alternator off of this to recharge that 12-volt battery if you had to. But at that rate of drainage, I think a little solar panel will do just fine. Possibly, maybe, who knows. Anywho, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and now I guess I'm done. I can start posting these video segments, and so you can see all of them, how it developed very gradually over the course of a few days now. It's been a few days. Let's see, how many days? How many days is it? Let's see, it all depends when the first one was. The first one was on the 16th of July, and today is the 23rd, so you subtract 16 from 23, and that's a week. Oh my god. I've been working on this for a week? Holy shit. No wonder I got 6 hours. A week? Oh my god. I had no idea. I've been working on this that much. Wow, I've been really working on this. Well, it was a tough thing, it was a very harsh criticism, but very true to life. That all I had was lumped inductors and nothing else. So what's it good for? Well, now you know. It's good for a UFO power supply or a mixed power supply. You can supply a UFO, or you can supply an EV or your house. You can boil water and run a steam engine and a Stanley steamer car if you like, You can do whatever you like with this thing. With that many megawatts of power for the resistive load, you could easily boil a lot of water there and run a little steam engine. Choo choo. Get rid of the diesel locomotives and bring back the steam locomotives. Get back to the good old days. But instead of knocking down firewood, trees of the forest, let the trees grow. You got to get the water though. So you run this little power supply at your various water stations along the train track, to condense water vapor from the atmosphere. And of course, the trees won't like that. They'll go into a drought condition, so they're not going to like it. But hey, if you have a good thick forest, they may be able to supply all the moisture you need, because trees are natural rainmakers. This is one of the things that Trevor Constable discovered, that you can go to a lot of trouble to make rain, but the easiest way is just plant a forest across the earth, because his best work was done over the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, because it rains there all the time. Why? Because the ocean's covered with water. Well, when you got a forest, that's about as close as you can come to a very large lake, such as Lake Michigan, or the ocean, Pacific Ocean, let's say, because they are natural rainmakers. Duh! You don't see any rain in the Sahara. Why? Because there's no forest. Somebody overgrazed many, many millennia ago and got rid of whatever used to be there. So all we have to do is plant lots of trees and stop cutting them down. Use some other material for building homes, but certainly don't burn all the wood. But we could have a steam locomotive system brought back without the use of burning logs to run it. If you want to go that way, You could do mixed. You could have an electric motor and a steam driven motor, and you could have the two of them powering a locomotive to get maximum thrust, because those locomotives require a lot of energy to haul ass, so to speak, up the side of one mountain and down the other. It's like, and actually, for your regenerative braking, you could have regenerative braking on the downside coming down the mountain to maybe charge up a bank of supercapacitors or charge up a battery pack. I don't know. All kinds of things you could do. So, okay, now I better shut up. This was a lot of fun. It ended on a good note, so I'm not depressed. I achieved more than my dreams. I didn't expect to achieve a UFO power supply and figure out how they... Well, I didn't figure it out. I have to give credit where credit is due. I simply filled in the gaps, because, patents do leave out information. They're designed to be that way, and so I managed to fill in the gap, and so now we don't have any gaps in our understanding of how a UFO mechanism works. Not the same as what William Lyne speculated, and then we can have a power supply to supply it, all the power it needs. So I've covered just about all that needs to be known about UFOs and the power supply for an EV, and we already know how to make the motor controllers and the motors for an EV, so the only thing missing was how to get rid of the battery pack and run off of the auxiliary battery under the hood alone. And Tesla told us we can have a primary battery and swap out the cathode plates, the nickel cathode plates, and get rid of this lead-acid business that is great moneymaker for the lead-acid battery manufacturers, but my God, not good for us. So a lot of solutions from various sources. It's good. It all looks good. The future looks bright.